Hey y'all, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we bring you a new release, and our From the Vault episodes, we share podcast releases from our 3 different podcast series: Recover Ed, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholics, and Hope for the Family. Our podcasts aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholics, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We are so glad that you're here. Thanks for listening.
Hello, podcast listeners. My name is Stephanie Crawford, and I am the host of this podcast, Recovered, Interviews with Alcoholic Women. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We are going to have a blast and talk to Emily C. And Emily, if you don't mind, first, congratulations on your engagement.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie.
That's so exciting. But if you don't mind, just give the listeners a little bit of background on what your alcoholism looked like and what brought you to a place to get sober.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. By the way, this is such an honor. A little bit about me. I grew up in Richardson, Texas, just north of Dallas. I lived in the same red brick house my whole childhood. My mother was an educator and a diagnostician. And in the last 7 years of her career, a assistant principal at an elementary school. My dad had a job as well. They split up when I was 4 or 5. They split, and that was no fun for me. And then my father got sick. My father passed away when I was in first grade. I was 7. Of course, that is not why I'm an alcoholic. You know, I'm an alcoholic because I have a mental obsession and a physical allergy. But I do remember being angry with God from age 7. That's what that did. And I still believed in a higher power. I was just pissed off about that. Other than that, normal childhood, I grew up playing soccer, and I did track, I did choir. I did always feel different. I always felt different than my friends, than everyone else. To me, it seemed like everybody else was in on some secret to life that I didn't know about, and they seemed so comfortable and things came so easily, and I felt like an outsider. I felt disconnected. I felt anxious and nervous all the time. And it was very important to me. I know now that this is a character defect. It's brought to my attention by my sponsor, but it was very important to me that people liked me, and kind of that perfectionism idea, which is control land, which, yeah, my sponsor still reminds me, Emily, God did not design you for everybody to like you. That's not helpful. God did not design you to be perfect. That's not helpful. So I do remember my dad drinking beer growing up, and my mom drinking like white wine with her girlfriends that she'd have over. I do not think I've ever seen my mother drunk. As far as I know, I am the only alcoholic in my family, as far as I know. And I guess if I'm not, that's none of my business, right? It's a self-diagnosed disease. Anyway, my dad would give me like little sips of his beer when I was small. And my mom, I remember her giving me little sips of wine, and I thought it was gross, whatever. My first drink was, I believe, in 9th grade, 8th or 9th grade. I was at a friend's house, and she had older siblings they were in high school, and they'd have parties all the time. And they got us some Zima. And that was my first experience tipsy, the effects of alcoholism. You'd put the little Jolly Rancher in the Zima, and I had a few. And I remember lying on my girlfriend's like a bedroom floor and watching the ceiling spin and just thinking that was the coolest feeling, that euphoria of it. I loved it. I loved it. That night, I remember feeling the sense of ease and comfort that the book talks about at once, like all that anxiety gone. I could talk to the guys that, were going to Berkner, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it continued to be fun. My personal experience is not being a blackout drinker from the beginning. I did not have the allergy in the beginning. Middle school, high school, college, drinking was fun. It worked. It was social. It was not a mental obsession. That didn't happen until I reached my mid-20s. And my drinking got weird. It got weird. It got secretive. That mental obsession was starting. And also the allergy. In my mid-20s, I was finding that I couldn't call my numbers sometimes, not all the time, but that's, this is a progressive disease, right? And I remember like 23, 24, 25, it started to get weird, and it got weird quick, problematic. Consequences were happening, which also, that's not what makes me an alcoholic, but things were starting to happen, and I was realizing that I was losing control. And because drinking did work for so long, I held on to that period, those years that it was good. It says in the book, the great obsession of every abnormal drinker is the ability to enjoy and control. And I held on to that, Stephanie, for so long. I just thought, if I can just get back there, if I can get my job right, or get the right guy, or get everything right, because the thought of giving it up was terrifying. To give up my solution to life was not something I was ready to do until I was totally out of options. And alcohol is the great persuader. It's the great persuader. So I drank. I think I went to my first A meeting. I was not sober, in 2010 or 2011, with a buddy that I had met. At that point, I knew I had a problem. I wasn't really ready to do anything about it, but I started going to meetings. And then every time the bottom would fall out, I remember that feeling. I don't know if this is making sense. Okay, it can't get any worse than this. If I can just manage and hold it here, I'll be okay. But it would always get worse. It always got worse. And so it wasn't until 2013 that I, after a lot of negative consequences, I'll put it that way, with personal relationships, with my place of employment, hurting people, embarrassed, just everything coming to a head. It wasn't until then that I was like, okay, I need help. And I had called my mom one night, and I said, I need help. I can't stop drinking, and I need help. We laugh about it now because she argued with me and said, you're not an alcoholic. But nevertheless, she came and she picked me up in the morning. And this was in 2013. And I went to my first treatment. I went to Homeward Bound. I went twice. What would happen is I would get in there, right? I would detox. I'd make friends. I I would get some information, right? That first trip to Homeward Bound was where I met my sponsor. She came in on a Friday night, which I couldn't believe that these beautiful, happy women came to rehab, came for an hour to carry him. Like, I couldn't believe that. It like blew my mind that these women came in to carry, and hold a meeting for us. And I remember exactly what my sponsor said that made me stop doodling and look up. She said, it was normal for me to wake up in the morning, turn on the coffee pot, and then crawl into the bottom of my closet and drink until my hands stopped shaking. And she said it just like that. No stigma, no shame. She said it just like she knew her truth. And I remember it like knocked the breath out of me. And I knew in that moment I wanted to work with her. The crazy thing about alcoholism is after being in there for 2 weeks, my brain will start saying things like, well, I'm not as bad as these heroin addicts. I think I'm so special that I will be able, now that I know that I'm an alcoholic and I've lost control, I just won't drink. I don't think I need to get a sponsor. I don't think I need to work the steps. I'm just not going to drink. Insanity. Weeks prior to that, I'm passed out in my own vomit. That's my truth. But my brain will be like, no, it wasn't. It's fine. It's not that bad. So 2013, it took me 4 treatments, 4 2-week treatments. I made it to Maggie's. I got busy with my sponsor, got to 3, got out, got into sober living. I was drunk within a week and a half. Step 1 experience. I cannot manage the decision to stay stopped. I can't. Being homeless, I thought that might stop me. It didn't. It absolutely didn't. Knowing I'm going to get kicked out of my sober living if I drank didn't stop me. So I got kicked out of my house. I had just left and I called my sponsor crying and said, I'm drunk. And when I drink that suicidal ideation, big time, and I said, I want to die. And she talked to me real calmly. And she was like, okay. I think she said something like, I was afraid of that because we were just about to do my 4-step. And she said, Emily, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm going to have to go back somewhere. There's no way I'm going to be able to stop. And she said, let me call you right back. I know now that she called her sponsor. And she called me back. And that was my last trip to Maggie's. That was that 4th trip. This was October 2013. And that is what it took me to totally get my step 1 experience. That is what led me to the program in AA and getting connected to this.
So you got sober at Maggie's?
I did. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did. Yeah. And I remember asking Lee when I was drunk on the phone with her. I was in a Wendy's parking lot. And I remember asking her, crying, are you still going to work with me? And I remember her saying, Emily, yes, but you have to go fast. That's what she said. If I'm not through the work within a week or 2, I'm done. That's just my truth. And I know plenty of women that can take their time and go a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And kudos, Godspeed, whatever works. I'll be so drunk, like after 2 weeks, if I'm not through the steps and connected to something else, I'm drunk.
Mm-hmm. So You got out of Maggie's this last time. First, Lee's your sponsor. We're going to get into this later, but she was supposed to come on this last week or the week before, but I got COVID. So
no, I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
So we're rescheduling, but I've never met her, but I've heard wonderful.
Really?
Yeah.
She's you'll ever. She's great.
Yeah, I've heard wonderful things. Well, so you left Maggie's and Lee said you had to go fast. What did that look like whenever you got out? Like, because I know there's going to be, because, like in, the land of recovery and 12-step and everything, like, you hear people that have their opinions or whatever about like how quickly or how slowly you should go through the steps. And so I know that somebody in here is going to hear, what, a week or two? Somebody who listens to this is going to hear, like, what, you go through the steps that fast? That's not thorough, and that's not, how does that work? And so I would just love for you to talk about how that worked for you. Like, what did that look like for you and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Okay, so what that looked like was Lee coming up to Maggie's, bringing me work to do, and I think she gave me, I want to say 5 days to a week to do my 4-step, because like she knew that's where I fell off before. We did 1, 2, 3. Like, she's like, are you powerless? And I was like, yes. And she's like, are you willing to go to any length? I said, yes. She said, can you follow direction? I said, yes. And she said, we'll see. That's what she said. I'll never forget it. She would come up to Maggie's. So by the time I left, back up, we spent like 2 minutes on step 2. She's like, do you believe in a higher power? Yeah, but I'm angry with it. Great. Moving on. We did my 3rd step prayer at the old Magdalen House on Redwood Circle, and I cried, and she held my hand. We got on our knees and she gave me my 4-step sheets and said, you have a week. I wasn't coddled, at that point, she wasn't going to be gentle with me. It was my job to follow directions, to be completely honest, and to do whatever she said. She told me, you are to treat your home group meetings. She said, Emily, you are to treat that as a commitment for now, meaning you're expected to be there Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday without fail, which I did. When she'd say, you're going to stand in front and greet tonight. Yes, ma'am. I had a week to do my 4th. We met at Starbucks, did my 5th step. I did leave something off. I did not forget. I omitted something, which of course, then in your 6, 7, right? That came up like, I probably should tell her about it. And I did. It was a Thursday night. We were to meet early because we're still going through the steps. And I said, I need to talk to you in private. And she said, okay. And we sat down like in one of the back rooms. And I said, I left something off. I left something off I'm really embarrassed about. And she was like, okay. And, all those things that we're so ashamed of and that make us cringe, our sponsors don't care. They have heard it. They have done it. They're not there to judge us. And I told her, and she was like, that's it? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, okay. She was like, I'm glad you told me, Emily, because being dishonest will lead you back to drinking again. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm telling you now. And she was like, okay. And we talked about that. And then I was making amends, 8, 9. I was making amends days later. And then that Friday night, I went with her to Homeward Bound, where I consider myself an alum, and carried the message. And it was a week and a half, 2 weeks. Did I feel ready to sponsor? No, but I was following directions because I was desperate. And I was just doing whatever she told me to do.
So were you sponsoring that early?
I was sponsoring, I want to say 5 or 6 months sober. I was sponsoring.
Mhm.
Yes.
And you were carrying the message with like 2 weeks sober.
Yeah. Yeah. And at first she just had me listen, you know? And then one time we went to Homeward Bound on a Friday and she was like, okay, ladies, Emily's going to share her story tonight. And I was like, what? But yes, I've had a commitment since then, either Homeward Bound or the 2-4. And she has made it very clear that that's vital, that that is not a optional thing to do.
Mhm. So, did you feel ready to carry the message?
No, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how I felt, you know? It's about action.
Mhm.
And she'd tell me that. And like, I remember her saying, Emily, when you're in a meeting now and it says, hey, if you're available to sponsor, raise your hand or stand up, I need you to do that. And I was like, what? And I was like, I don't feel ready. And she was like, all you have to offer these women is your experience in the book. That's it. Like, she's like, you are uniquely qualified to help alcoholic women. And God will put women in your life on his time as he sees fit. But you are the middleman between God and alcoholic women. Stand up. And I was like, yes, ma'am.
Mm. And she's been your sponsor this whole time?
Whole time. Yes, ma'am. She has.
How has that relationship changed or grown or evolved? Or because that's a long time since 2013 to have the same sponsor.
Okay, the truth is I was kind of afraid of her at first, right? Or afraid of doing something wrong, which probably goes back to ego and fear and character defects. But like, I remember once having to meet her and I was late. I was working at a pizza place at the time and I got there and I was like 30, 40 minutes late. The meeting hadn't started. She wanted me to meet her before. And she looked up at me and she said, come outside and talk to me for a minute. And I was like, ugh. And she just looked me in the eye and she said, last chance. And I knew what she meant, because I was slacking, I was late. And I said, okay. When we talk on the phone now, we say, I love you, which we didn't used to. And she has told me that she loves me now, like as a friend, but that came after me doing the step work and me getting connected to God. She is my friend now. Like sometimes we can speak to each other just as friends, just as two women in recovery, which is wonderful. That's wonderful. When my Aunt Mary passed away a few years ago, she showed up to the celebration of life. I stayed really close to her during that time, and she has shown up for me through the dark spots in my life, both as my sponsor and as a friend. I hope she would say the same thing. I just adore her, and she's not afraid to hurt my feelings. She's never been afraid she's going to tell me the truth. And I'll tell girls that ask me to work with them, I'm going to match your effort, and I can't want this more than you do. And maybe that hurts their feelings, but Lee, she will tell me the truth. She will point out my ego, my fear, tells me when I'm being delusional, when my fantasy life spins out of control. And she'll be like, okay, honey, that hasn't even happened yet. Like, how we get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think God knew that I needed that. Because in the beginning, like, she made it very clear, like, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to get you through the steps and hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. But yeah, and I feel like now we are friends.
When did you stop being afraid of her?
That's a good question. Maybe after I had sponsored a few women and could have conversations with her about sponsoring women.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the beginning, that accountability and the rigorous honesty it requires, that was very counterintuitive to the way I was used to living. So having someone holding me accountable felt uncomfortable and scary. So maybe 2 years in, I stopped being afraid of her.
Oh, this is totally going in a different direction, but when did you meet your fiance and how did you guys meet?
Oh, okay. We met on Bumble.
Woohoo!
Yeah, Bumble.
I did not have any luck with Bumble or Hinge. I tried them both.
Oh, well, I dated about a year on it, right? And it's tricky online dating because sometimes you'll get really excited about a guy and then it fizzles out, or online dating, it can be tricky. God, it's 2022 now. We met September 3 years ago. Yeah, we met on Bumble. We started messaging. I really liked what he put in his profile. What you put on your little profile. He said something like, I believe it would take nothing short of a miracle to meet someone on here. And I thought that was funny. And we started chit-chatting, and I don't think we met in person for like a month. And we just talked. We just would chat on Bumble, and then we would do the phone call thing. And then we met for sushi one Friday night. And the first few months of us dating was just sushi restaurants. That's all we did for the first few months. He is not an alcoholic. He's a normie, which, fascinates me that he can drink a beer and then leave the rest of the 6-pack in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
That's weird to me. And he's great. And he understands what I'm doing. In the beginning, I remember him being like, is this something you're going to have to do forever? And I was like, yes. Yeah, unless you want to see me drunk and it's not cute. Like, I kind of had to explain to him because he's never seen me drunk, right?
Right. And how did that go? Because I know there's going to be somebody listening, because I'm just thinking of like all my attempts at getting sober, and one of them was like, oh my God, what do I tell the guy on it? So like, why I don't drink? And then later it was like, okay, I don't care if he knows I don't drink, but like, how do I tell him that like I have to like work this 12-step program forever or I die, and so how did that conversation go?
Okay, let me think, Stephanie. I think that was something that came up in one of our phone calls. And I told him, hey, listen, man, like, I'm a recovered alcoholic. And what that means is I go to meetings and I help others and I have a commitment. And it was brought up on one of our dates, or at some point I remember him saying like, Emily, sometimes I do wish that you could have a drink with me, like when we're on a date. Like sometimes I wish that we could share that. And I think I reacted saying something like, is this going to be an issue? Because like, I'm not going to relapse. And do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that would be, it's a lovely thought that I could have a glass of wine with you on a date night. But guess what? I have an allergy and a mental obsession, and I'm a raging, chronic, relapsing alcoholic. And I was like, Mark, I promise you if I was drinking, you would not want to spend time with me. I promise you. I can drive the men away. And like, I think that's hard for him to visualize or imagine, you know?
Because we've seen it.
He's never seen it. And we're different people when we're drunk. So I'm like, just trust me. It's better that I don't drink. And when I asked him, is this going to be an issue? He was like, no, you know, because of course he could find a woman that could have some cocktails with him on a date night. It's not me, but he could. When the time is right and you do feel ready to like share that with someone you're dating and that's your truth, just share it. You just, you know, if it's something that you do have to do, and if they're cool with it, they're cool with it. And if they're not, bye, Felicia.
Yeah, definitely. I know I had dated a guy and he was like, do you get paid? Because I would be like, okay, I got to go speak here, or like, I got to go to this treatment center again. Like, do you get paid for all that? When do you get a night off? And I was like, well, no, I don't get paid. It's my like duty and I enjoy doing it. And like, this is my night off. I don't know. Like, this is what I do. And it caused friction in our relationship, you know, because sometimes like he would feel like neglected, or like, you have a night off work and it should be spent with me, or, you know, like, you'll get a babysitter for that, but not get a babysitter for this, you know. But I also know that there's people like Mark who will completely support and embrace it.
Yeah, to explain to someone. So when we tell people that aren't addict or alcoholic, like, this is life or death for me, maybe they think we're being dramatic or something. We're not. Like, this is life and death for me. And yeah, the truth is sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to the 2-4, but it is the bright spot of my life. You know, I love Mark. I love my fiance, and I love the people in my life. But like it says in the book, I'm paraphrasing, it's, you don't want to miss this, being able to help the newcomer. And I thought this was bull when I first got sober, but it is true. Like, you get a buzz from it. You like, that's the closest I feel to God is when I'm getting another woman through the steps. And then I'm a better fiance, I'm a better friend, I'm easier to be around when I'm doing this. When I'm practicing these principles in all my affairs. He can tell when I'm starting to stray because I get sideways.
Yeah. And not every partner is going to have a sponsor to be able to 10-step with before like reacting and making things worse. I mean, we can still do that for sure, but it's nice to have that sponsor to be able to 10-step before really blowing things up, you know?
Right, which I wish I 10-stepped before I blew up, but I still blow up occasionally.
Yeah.
And then I have to call Lee crying and she's got to straighten me out. And yeah, sometimes I have to make amends, you know, to Mark and say, I regret this. I was wrong. What can I do?
Are you the loved one of an alcoholic? Our family support group serves as a community for friends, loved ones, and family members of alcoholics to learn about alcoholism, understand how to help an alcoholic, and experience an improved quality of life, regardless of the alcoholic's recovery. We have weekly support meetings that meet virtually and in person, as well as a monthly speaker meeting. To find out more about our family support group, visit magdalenhouse.org/family.
Well, speaking of the 10-step, and this just kind of came to me because we were talking about it the other day, where like, I don't like, especially like early on in recovery, like I literally like 10-stepped everything. like I missed the bus, I'm calling my sponsor to 10-step fear, like everything. But what I have seen based on my experience in staying sober and watching other women is that there's sometimes like a disconnect there with what to 10-step, how to 10-step, what is a 10-step. So like, do you mind talking about like your experience with that, and like what would you say to someone who's like newly sober, struggling in that area?
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Side note, my first 6 to 9 months of sobriety, Lee would have me, I know this isn't 10 stepping, this is 11, but it helps 10 stepping too. She would have me on page 86, nightly review. Give me 1 second, Stephanie. She would have me either email her, like when we retire at night, constructively review our day. It would be like 1, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? I would type something or write something. Do we owe an apology? I would go through all that either on paper, take a picture of it, send it to her, or email it to her. And of course, after your 4th and 5th step, you like bare your soul so you're not embarrassed to 10 step. In the beginning, I did 10 step a lot. I had a lot of, I would feel resentful in the beginning of some of my coworkers. I remember getting comments like, "Oh, I didn't know that you still worked here, Emily." Because, I'd gone to rehab so many times, and I'd be like, "Yep, well, I'm just, fighting for my life." And they'd be like, "Yeah, who's winning?" Just like what I perceived as snarky comments, which no, I wouldn't care. But then it like embarrassed me or hurt my feelings or pissed me off. And having to call Lee about that, with some of my coworkers that I didn't get along with, and her having to point out my part in it, whether it's an expectation of how people act or treat me. I remember once, this isn't really a 10 step, but my car broke down on the way to work and I didn't panic. Like I let my boss know, "Hey, I'm going to be late," this and that, called AAA. And like the fact that I didn't totally lose my mind was new for me. I didn't cry. And I remember calling Lee and being like, "Hey, I'm on the side of the road and I'm totally calm." And she said, "Yeah, God's doing for you what you can't do for yourself." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So yeah, in the beginning, every day, I'd either call her with something or I would 10 step, and she would tell me, my part in it, tell me to make amends if I'd harmed someone, and then say, "Go be helpful to somebody else." And like at a certain point, I'd pick up the phone to 10 step and I'd be like, "Oh my God, I know exactly what she's going to say." Around 9 months, I kind of stopped calling her as much as I should have, to the point where I had a couple close friends, girlfriends in recovery, say, "Emily, I think you need to call your sponsor." And I don't know if that's because I was afraid of what she was going to tell me. I was holding on to a relationship. And I guess my point is that there are times where I would kind of not disappear, but keep some resentments or fear to myself, which I do not recommend. The cool thing is, after a while of sitting in the uncomfortableness, which I did have to do for a little bit, I was ready to call her. It's like the obsession to drink wasn't there. I knew what I needed to do, which was call Lee. And that all goes back, of course, to step 1, but still 8 years in, I'll still drift into control land. Think about that 4th column on your 4th step. All those character defects still pop up. and Lee's real quick to point them out to me, which I love her for.
Now, I wrote this down while you were talking as a reminder to ask you about it. So you said like your mom was saying like, Emily, you're not an alcoholic. What did and you say you laugh about it now, like what did she think was wrong with you, and like when did she discover that you are an alcoholic, and how has that relationship grown or changed since you've gotten sober?
I think the level of denial on her part was very strong. And for her, and I'll let her speak for herself in February.
Yes,
but
she's going to be coming on too.
She has said to me in the past, like, the thought of my only daughter being an alcoholic, that was hard for her to wrap her mind around. And I don't know if it's because she thought she did something wrong or it was her fault, because that's bullshit, you know? I'm an alcoholic because I am, you know? She's a great mother. But that level of denial, she argued with me, you know? She did not want to believe that her daughter's an alcoholic. Like I called her and was like, I need help. Like I need to go somewhere. And like I said, she did pick me up and she sat with me. You know, going to Homeward Bound is an all-day event. You're in that waiting room all day. And she sat next to me, did her crossword puzzle. She started making friends with people in the waiting room. She told me later, my God, it was so hard to sit next to you. You reeked. And I was like, yeah. And I remember her asking me, how could I not know about this? Or how did I not see this happening or something like that? And I was like, well, I mean, I tried to hide it and you're in denial, so it wasn't hard, you know? Did that answer the question?
Yeah. I just wanted you to talk more about it because I thought it was kind of funny, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and during my journey through getting connected, she found Al-Anon, you know, which she says, she's like, Al-Anon was my lifeline. I literally had never heard of Al-Anon until my mom said, I'm going to Al-Anon. And I was like, what the hell is that? And she was like, it's for people who have alcoholics loved ones. And I was like, well, what do you do? It didn't make sense. This is how selfish I was. She was like, well, you know, we kind of do the same things you do. I was like, that makes no sense. You are not powerless over alcohol. You're not you're not powerless. And she was like, Emily, I'm powerless over your alcoholism. And I was like, oh, okay. Like that didn't occur to me, you know, because for so many years I love to think my alcoholism doesn't affect anyone. None of your business. Stay out of my affairs. This doesn't affect you, which is so selfish and self-centered.
And not true.
And not true. We affect everyone around us. We're like the tornado, right?
Yes, absolutely. You and Ainsley are really close, right?
Yes. I adore her. We lived together for years, and Ainsley's wonderful. She's wonderful.
How did you guys meet?
I think the first time I met Ainsley was before a PPG meeting. And I remember seeing this petite, blonde, cute girl. And then she lived in an Oxford house. I lived in an Oxford house, different ones. I remember giving her a ride once to PPG, her and a couple other girls. And then at one point, she needed to move houses. And I remember she called to do a phone interview and we talked. So I got to live with her in sober living before we lived together, you know. just me and her.
Mhm.
And nobody's a better roommate than Ainsley.
How awesome. Now, I remember, maybe I was thinking maybe this was your story, but like you were talking about, like you were in sober living, and like your sponsor, I think, had said to you, like, it will be very, very clear when it is time for you to move out. Is that your story?
Well, yeah, I probably a lot of women's story, but yeah, she did say that.
Will you talk about that? Just because I know that there's also going to be women listening to this who, like, I'm just experiencing it with a sponsee right now who's like praying about whether or not it's time for her to move out. And so, like, there's going to be other people listening. So do you mind like sharing your experience with sober living and moving out of sober living?
Absolutely. I always had told myself I'm going to live in sober living 1 year, because they really had me sold on that idea. If you can live in Oxford for 1 year, your percentages of long-term sobriety was like 90 something percent. And I remember thinking, well, I need that, women's numbers aren't good, and I need all the help and accountability I can get. So the plans that I had in my head about moving out after a year, I'm not going to get into it. My personal life fell apart. And it was clear that my plans to move out with who I thought I was going to move out with, that wasn't going to happen. So I was like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay here. I'm going to stay put. I stayed for 3 years. I lived at Odette. It's in chapter 16. And that's longer than I thought I would stay. Of course, I was the most senior member by that point. And I remember Lee saying, like, God will make it really uncomfortable when it's time. And God did. And I had to put away my preconceived plans of what my life was going to look like. Like, if you told me, when I first got sober or whatever, hey, you're going to live in an Oxford house for 3 years, I would have been like, no, I'm not. But that's what ended up happening. I felt like as long as I could be helpful to the house and still take care of my stuff, that I could stay. And a time did come where it was time. It was time. And I left the house on good terms. And for a while, they would still have me like come sit in emergency house meetings and stuff. But she'll know. That's what I'd like to tell the people who are struggling with that, like prayerful consideration. I always encourage women, don't move out or make a rash, impulsive decision because you're reacting to something. There were times where I did not have rent. There were times where I had to pay fines for leaving my stuff in the dryer or whatever, breaking the rules. And when that stuff happens, yeah, you can be mad about it for a minute, but then realize like you have to follow the rule. Like I'd always tell women, don't move into sober living or Oxford if you don't want to be held accountable. But when there are consequences and you have to pay a fine or you have to do extra chores because you're on whatever, what do they call it?
Contract?
Yeah, that's what you signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you have to remove your ego, follow directions, and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not just for you, but for the house. And the women that I met, God, the women that I met at Odette are some of the closest friendships I have to this day. Yeah, it's where I met Ainsley. It's where I met Ariana, Taylor. Women I'm not sure I would have met otherwise,
Yeah.
you know? And I remember some of the relapses in the house, I would cry for 3 days. After a while, maybe I did get a little desensitized to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like a good demonstration of the reality of what we're dealing with. I have lost roommates, you know. I've lost friends. in the 8 years. And that sucks. But that is the reality of this disease. So as long as I keep doing 10, 11, and 12, as long as I'm helping other women, that's my job now, right? I have a new director. I have a new employer. Yeah. And I think sober living is great. I think Oxford is great. It's not what got me sober. There's some people I hear that's like, Oxford saved my life. That's great. That's, I relapsed out of Oxford.
Same.
And then I went back and stayed for 3 years. But I believe in Oxford was a good place to get a solid foundation, to be held accountable. It is not what saved my life. The steps and God did that. But the women I met there, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah.
So I guess my point for the people, the women that are struggling with that, prayerful consideration. Do not move out if you're reacting to something. Stick it out because it'll pass in a month. I would just try your best to leave the house on good terms, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Before, because I know that we've been here for an hour, but
Oh my God.
I don't want to like take up all of your time or anything, but before like we get, wrapping up and stuff, is there anything that like you want to make sure we talk about that I can ask you about?
Nothing's coming to mind. No.
All right, cool. And then I do want to ask with you, okay, so you've been sober for 8 years, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've had the same sponsor and the same home group the entire time. Has there ever been a time where you were like, I need something else? This is, or, or have you, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, sometimes we can get to this place where we think like, oh, I need to switch things up, like, have you ever experienced that, or did you ever experience? And what did you do when you were feeling that way? And like, why have you decided not to do that? And because I think it's really cool, and it's also really unique, that like you have that experience. And I'm sure there are times where you probably were like, thinking otherwise, but do you mind just talking about that?
Absolutely, yes. There are times where I have taken a step back from AA meetings, even before COVID, to the point where me and Lee will have to have a talk about it. And she'll be like, what's going on? And I had to get real honest with her about why I wasn't going, to at least one meeting a week. I only say this if it can be helpful to someone. And in 2020, I did have a episode / nervous breakdown and had to get some help, had to get into some therapy and see a doctor and all that stuff. And I really limited my social, not that an AA meeting is a social event, but I limited my going out stuff. Staying really close to Lee the entire time and working with other women the entire time. Thank God. But yeah, there have been times where I'm like, I need to change, or I'm going to go to DAA for a little bit. For a while, my friend, like if my friends have like a monthly commitment, just recently, my friend had a monthly commitment and an open discussion meeting, which I hadn't been doing so long. And I would go with her every Tuesday to like an 8:00 meeting, which was super late for me, just to, I don't know, spice it up, get a little something different, which is great. It's not my home group, but yes, I have had those times where I need a break. And I have had that insane thought where I think, I don't know if I need AA anymore. I've had that. Absolutely.
And then is it followed up with the same thought of like, no, I do actually?
Yeah. Or a conversation with Lee or, someone else in recovery who's like, girl, like as bad as you were, yeah, you do.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, if I have my faith in God and carrying the message and all that stuff. But yeah, I do have those insane thoughts sometimes.
And I imagine you really trust Lee, right?
I do. Absolutely.
And was that trust built over time, or like or were you just like, I have no choice but to trust this person because I'm gonna die kind of thing?
No, the trust came over time. The
Mhm.
trust came over time. And, she wasn't this is a good way to sponsor too. She wasn't very forthcoming about her personal stuff, when I first got sober. And why would she? She's trying to like save my life, get me through the steps. But as the years have gone by, and I'll call her with stuff, and she'll share some of her personal life, that builds trust as well. I mean, I always trusted her, but now it's like a more intimate, you know, when you disclose things about your personal life that you don't have to.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
that's grown, absolutely. And
Mm.
and I always knew in the back of my mind, if I don't follow directions, if I don't do what this woman says, boop, I'm cut.
Mhm.
You made that very clear.
Yeah. Well, since we are past the hour, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you and just hang out with you for the last hour. Your voice is so soothing to me. So,
Oh, thank you.
yes. My wrap up question would be, what would you want to leave the listeners with? Like, if it's for the woman who's getting sober or staying sober, what would you want them to leave this podcast with, if you could say one thing for them?
If I could say one thing to them, I would say, if you're ready, if you're willing to go to any length, find a sponsor, ask her if she's had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, and then work the steps. Work them thoroughly, honestly, as outlined in the book. It is guaranteed to change your life.
Love it. So good. All right. Thank you so much, Emily. I will see you in February with you and your mama.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this From the Vault re-release of the Magdalen House podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a new release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.